Hello friends, welcome to today's reflection and meditation. The title is The Garden, and we're going to draw upon the inspiration of the stories we have of Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane before he is betrayed, after the Last Supper and before he is betrayed. There is an image, I think, that is conjured up for me with the word garden, and that is a place of lusciousness, a place to luxuriate in, to relax in, to be held in. And it's interesting that this very place of the garden is the place that offers Jesus the safe zone where he can be completely vulnerable, and ultimately the consolation that comes from that level of vulnerability and level of openness to experience insight and, if you will, the presence of the divine. But what I want to do is I want to do a very small little academic setup for the reflection on the garden. We'll get to the reflection part. What I'd like to do is piece together a little bit of what is credited as being fairly well grounded in being factual. So historical critical analysis, we can really, when we look deeply from a scholarly standpoint and look at the texts that are available to us, the archaeological evidence, and anything else by way of tradition and culture that gives us the idea of what happened that night and the next day. We can only say that it looks to be so. It looks to be so. There's a lot of credibility to what I'm going to present to you as being reliable information. So I invite you to take it as possibly so. Don't just swallow it, hook, sinker, and just don't swallow it whole like that. But take it as possibly so, just to let your imagination get involved. So there are a number of events that happen from the time of the Last Supper up until the time of the crucifixion in Jesus's life. And I want to start by showing you a map. See this map of the area of Jerusalem at that time. So the dark line would have been the wall around the city in the time of Jesus, and the lighter dotted line would be the city wall after Jesus during the next time period. And look at the relationship between all these areas. So you can see where the garden is, where the Mount of Olives, where the temples are, where Golgotha is considered to be. You'll notice on this map that, scholarly speaking, there were two sites put out there as being the site of the crucifixion. It's most likely, and I hold the academic stance, that it's the traditional site. And I don't want to get into the why of that. If you're interested, we can have a conversation. But it gives you a sense of the relationship between the areas. And it's held to be so that Jerusalem was mainly about 600 meters by 1,200 meters. So it's not, 600 meters is less than half a mile. So it's not a massively large space. And that's basically Jerusalem proper. Now in this next map that I like, it's the tracing of Jesus's steps from the time of the Last Supper. And there's been a lot of academic research into this. Now you'll see that from the angle it's slightly skewed from the other map, just to give you a little bit different, it just lays it out a little bit easier. So number one is where it's postulated, and this is the least credible, that the Last Supper happened in an upper room. It's just been too difficult to trace how that room came about, how they got there, where it actually was. But it's largely held that it's in that part of Jerusalem. So you can see that. And what would have happened is they would have had the Last Supper after sunset, because the culture at the time judged days from sunset to sunset. Hence why you brought in Shabbat, after sunset. So it would have been probably after 6 p.m.-ish at that time of the year. After sunset, that the Last Supper or the Passover Seder would have taken place in that upper room. And most likely that dinner, and you get these different accounts in the 4 Gospels of all that took place. There's foot washing in some, not in others, but there's a long sharing of a meal, and they would have done the traditional Seder. So it is thought that that meal went all the way up to about midnight, and it would have ended by singing the Hallel. So you've got this long meal taking place at 1. Now, this didn't have to happen after the Passover Seder, but Jesus led whoever was with him at the meal to the Mount of Olives. So you can see the relationship between where they think the Last Supper was and the Mount of Olives. It's thought to have been maybe like a half a mile or so. And the Mount of Olives, if you look at pictures, is 3 summits, very, very dusty. They call them summits. They look like hills to me. They look like maybe just little dips in the land. And he went there, and that's where some of the predictions took place. So the Mount of Olives was considered very significant in the Judaic culture. The Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane, which is at the foot of that mount, was a place of prayer. It's even where David prayed when Absalom, his son, was coming after him. Prophecy, like from Zechariah, was considered to have taken place there. It was considered a place of potency, which I find remarkable, because you had the holy temples, the holiest of holy places, but the place of real communion with the divine and prophecy, so the mystical places actually take place outside the city walls. And if the records are correct, this would have been the 3rd time Jesus was going to the Mount of Olives. The first time was right before Palm Sunday. He was there, and he was at first avoiding coming into Jerusalem, and then came in on a donkey. The second would have been when sometime during that week, he made predictions of the destruction of the temple. He looks out on Jerusalem and weeps. He talks to his followers about how things will be destroyed and rebuilt. Lots of prophetic statements, he says. And then the third is this actual physical event. And there is where Peter's denial is predicted, and that everyone's going to be scattered. And so he has already prepared his followers to a certain degree. But drop into even the thought of this knowing. I would think that there's a mixture of being very grounded in the solemnity of it. Jesus was very real. And a way that prophecy was carrying him. I don't know about you, but I have had the gift of prophecy a lot in my life. And I find that when the words flow through me, they accomplish their end. Their origin is mysterious, and there's something that, regardless of what the words are, there's something of being carried in the message, and in a way you're real with it, but in another way you're not so real with it. It's like it's just channeling through you. So Jesus has been saying a lot of words he's in the flow of this prophecy as well. So in a way he's a master, but he's also a student. He is the eternal witness, and he is the human participant, all at the same time. So they would have made it out to that time, sometime after midnight they would have gotten there. And then, and so then when you look then at the map, you'll see that the garden where they walked, which is number 3, is very close by, because it's just at the foot. Now it's outside the city wall proper. And this is where it would have been, just a couple minutes walk. This is where you get Jesus praying in deep anguish. We're going to go back to this scene after I lay the whole set. This is where the friends that are with him fall asleep. All right. This is where the betrayal happens, in the grove. And I'd invite you to just do a little Google search on what the grove would have looked like. You know, it's small. It's small. And the olive trees that are there now are thought to be about 1,000 years old, but would have been seedlings of the olive trees that would have been there in the time of Jesus. And remember, without modern watering, it was probably even more arid back then than it is even from what we see now, but very small, big olive trees. Now, it's thought that after that, when the betrayal took place, that then he was taken to number 4, which would have been Anas's house. Now, this isn't in every account. It's only in the account of John. And Annas would have been, he wasn't the high priest anymore, but he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest. And records show that Annas was probably the wealthiest Jewish person in Jerusalem. That's massive. The population at that time was considered to be about 25,000 people, and he was the wealthiest Jewish person. It wasn't only Jewish people there, but wealthiest Jewish person in the largest Mecca place for the Judaic culture. So he would have borne an incredible amount of influence. It's mysterious as to why he was taken there first. And since this is an illegal arrest, even though Roman soldiers were there and Jewish leaders were there, it's done before daybreak. It's done before daybreak. So sometime between midnight and before daybreak would have been considered about 6 a.m. This happens. It would have been a short walk. It's thought that maybe it was like a 5-minute walk. It doesn't look like that on the map, because if you trace from number 1 to number 2 being a half a mile, which would have taken 20 minutes, it doesn't look like it's only 5 minutes, but it wouldn't have been long. It would have been probably 10 at most. It probably was happening, 4 in the morning. And so Jesus's time of prayer would have been anywhere from 1 to 4 in the morning. And who knows how long they were there and what kind of discussion was happening. Maybe it was a precursor. We don't know. We have nothing. We have no idea if Jesus was questioned or if he was simply arrested and there was discussion of what was supposed to happen next, what would ensure the end they wanted of him being killed. We have no idea. We have no idea if he was really, his hands were tied up or anything like this happened. We have no idea. It's shown that he was bound, but Jesus was such a peaceful person. And in one account where Peter cuts the ear off of a soldier, Jesus heals them. So, with his willingness to just walk with them, who knows? But then Annas sends him to Caiaphas, the high priest's house. And this is where the determination that he is definitely going to be sent to be crucified happens. And again, this happens before daybreak, and it's considered only a couple-minute walk from the one house to the next. The Sanhedrin is thought to have been at Annas's house, so maybe there was a bit of a posse waiting at Annas's house to build a plan around this. We don't know if they talked to the Romans ahead of time about this, or if it was only kept within the Judaic culture. There was probably a strategy involved to know what would get us what we want best. What would get us, would confiding in the Romans be best? They had Roman soldiers there, so there had to have been some involvement of the Romans. Did Pilate know Jesus was going to be delivered to him at 6 a.m.? We don't know these things. We don't know. What we do know is that if the population in Jerusalem was about 25K, it is thought that during this time of Passover, the biggest time of the year for them, that there would have been at least 4 to 5 times that amount of people. Some studies say 125,000, others say 180,000. But look how small Jerusalem is, and that many people would have been in Jerusalem. Now, it's not like modern day. There weren't hotels. Jerusalem, while built up as a bit of a tourist place, wouldn't have had the infrastructure to house everybody. So people had to have been sleeping in the streets. It was packed. And of course, if you've got something happening at 4 or 5 in the morning that's got soldiers involved, it's going to wake people up and people are going to be curious. I mean, I don't know about you, when I see an accident on the side of the road, I slow down to see what happened. This would have been the mass interest in this. And would people have recognized Jesus? Some would have, because they lived in that area and they were aware of his teachings. Others would not have. So you've got a mixed populace. In the account where Jesus comes in on the donkey and everybody praises him, would all of those people been involved? Some would have, but not all of them would have. So that gives you a little bit of a feeling of this. So they're at Caiaphas's house. How long would that have happened? We don't know. We don't know. We do know, though, that what is happening here is with Peter's denial, it's most likely that it happened outside of Caiaphas's house. So it would have been before daybreak. Romans were involved. It was illegal. Peter is outside of a residence, not outside of the big temple as far as it's recorded. People had fires going on, so people are awake through the night. Maybe the excitement of it being Passover, people were staying up. If you were young, I know that probably if I was there in my 20s or 30s, I would have been up through the whole night praying and talking with people and being part of community. So that gives you a feeling for what was happening here. And what is fairly uniformly recorded is that Jesus was taken to the praetorium. So you can see number 5. That would have been where Pilate would have interrogated him. Now, there's speculation on how long that would have taken, and that would have been something that would have not involved the public at first. Pilate, in his desire to keep peace, would have wanted it to be a private affair that resolved itself, right? Where he worked out a private negotiation with the Jewish leaders, or maybe something with Jesus. We get recorded. How do we get part of that conversation recorded? That's a little mysterious, right? When the whole conversation about truth and what is truth, where was that taking place? How do we have record of that? You know, we have record of Pilate's wife having a dream of Jesus. Maybe she wrote down the conversation. There were probably people in that circle who loved Jesus. Maybe that's how we get record of some of what happened there. It's thought that that probably was about 30 minutes. So you're talking, I'm making this up, 6:30 in the morning, that only one account has Jesus being sent to Herod of Antipas. That's in Luke. So that one account that he goes and is seen by Antipas, but it seems like that happened so fast, and Herod's like, absolutely not, I am not dealing with this. Who knows even why? He probably was abreast of what is happening. He came into town for the Passover. He's probably not been highly involved in Jesus's ministry, but would have been aware of it from afar and wanting others to handle it. But he immediately sends it back to Pilate. Conjecture as to why, probably power plays, apathy, all sorts of things like that. So it would have only been, they think, 5 minutes back and forth, and he would have been back to Pilate's. Now, this is where Pilate would have asked the people. Now, by this point, everything that's been happening has been going on for at least an hour and a half. So you can imagine it's daybreak. It's probably 7 o'clock by now. People are awake. They are interested. They are getting riled up from the mass consciousness that's going on. And Pilate would have tried to release Jesus. So he couldn't rely on the Jewish leaders wanting to let him go. He would have hoped that he could have released, in light of Passover, somebody that was really a criminal, since he really didn't have grounds for this illegal crucifixion to take place. How many people were there saying, crucify him, crucify him? That makes me want to cry even when I say it. We don't know. There's probably a lot of people. There were probably instigators. The Jewish people were probably smart enough to say, let's put people in the crowds and get it instigated and have some people shout out and get other people to shout out. They say, we would not have delivered him to you if he was not guilty. Things like that. It's built up a mass movement at this point, which happens in humanity, doesn't it? We've seen it happen. It's happening now. So you've got that. You've got that taking place. The records have it down that the scourging and the crowning with thorns and all of that humiliation, that would have only taken, because they were so used to doing it, up to 20 minutes. Because Pilate would have wanted to wash his hands of this and get this taken care of. So the decision in that, it probably all happened and took place before 8 in the morning. And then you can see by the next, he walked to Golgotha. So you've got Golgotha here. So you've got the Praetorium, 5 minutes back, and he walks to Golgotha here. So that would have been the gate that he would have had to walk through. The most credible sources and collective ideas around this says that it's 600 meters, which would have been 0.37 miles. So under a half a mile, but more than a quarter of a mile. And Jesus would have taken some kind of cross that was already prepared for a crucifixion. They believed that walk took at least an hour because of the condition that he was in. And that would make sense, right? Think about if you walk a slow mile, it could take 45 minutes. So walking a slow half mile could take 25 minutes. Taking an hour carrying something massive, falling, running into people along the way. And at this point, you're going to have a lot of curiosity because somebody the day after Passover is being crucified. I mean, think about the ramification of that. Here, individuals have just celebrated one of the biggest feast days in their entire year. People have come from all over. They've been up till midnight celebrating, remembering. They would have been in the energy of what's happening. And the next day, somebody that was considered to be holy by many people is being crucified. Stories would have been shared. There would have been a mass interest. And think about if there's 125,000 people at least in Jerusalem, in this small area, there were a lot of people. So whereas some of our gospel stories and any story of anybody enlightened, I could give Buddha stories, we have no idea of the exact numbers. And a lot of times you get this feeling that it's really big. It's like when Herod had the 2 and 3 year olds killed. You get this feeling it's like hundreds and hundreds when you find out it's maybe 30 children killed. Here, it's accurate to think that there were tens of thousands of people involved in this. And people that would have had only the guide of their own inner compass. Those that could sense wrong would have stood up. They maybe not have given voice to it, but they would have walked out of sympathy. Those who are easily derailed and taken into mass consciousness would have followed that. There would have been a very high level of energy around this taking place in a lot of people. So you get Jesus walking this less than half a mile to Golgotha, which again, with many records, makes place. In the accounts of the 3rd and the 6th and the 9th hour, there's a general consensus, not necessarily in John, but in the first 3, that he was most probably crucified at 9 a.m. Now, oftentimes it's celebrated at noon because of an interpretation that he was on the cross for 3 hours. But when you look at it scholastically, there's just as much evidence to say that he was on the cross from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 6 hours on the cross before he actually died. But going into the final throes of agony at noon, that's what scholarly has a fair amount of credibility to it. And then you can see that the tomb was right near there. Isn't that remarkable that so quickly, who was it? How did that come about? Obviously, some of the leaders that really believed in him Joseph, Nicodemus, they would have wanted him to at least have a burial, and the burial would have happened there. Now take this into account, because look how close this is to all of the tens of thousands that are there and all the activity that would have lingered through the rest of the weekend. And here then you even get a big stone rolled across there. It's not like it's out in the middle of nowhere. You know, a lot of the portrayals of Jesus meeting Mary at the tomb and the stone being rolled back, you get it situated like out in the desert. It would have been very close to town, very close to town. So that was a very long setup. But I hope you found it interesting, even from the imagination perspective. Now we'll move into a reflection about the garden. The garden. With your imagination or your senses, see if you can feel into what this would have been like for Jesus. We've all experienced moments like that where we know the next step in our lives is one that we don't relish, one where we wished it had turned out differently, especially when we've given our whole heart to something. We get here a glimpse of Jesus that I think is incredibly important for us, because oftentimes when we're on a spiritual path, we can bypass being real and letting ourselves be really vulnerable, really undone. We can bypass this. Bypass, even if we know what the next step is, bypass the process that takes us most fully into the next step. That's the key here. So even when we're clear on a next step, part of being fully alive is living it through. Living it through. I'm going to read Matthew's version of the Garden of Gethsemane. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and told his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee with him and began to be grieved and distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me." He went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, "Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." He came back to the disciples and found them sleeping. He said, "You could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watch so that you do not come into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "Father, if this cup cannot pass away unless I drink from it, your will be done." He came back and found them sleeping again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them and he prayed a third time, saying the same thing. Then he came back and he woke his friends. In Luke's gospel, it says that his sweat became so profuse that it was like drops of blood. And in John's gospel, it says that an angel appeared to him to give him strength. And what I think is so powerful for us is that he says so eloquently in the second denial in this passage, "If this cup cannot pass away unless I drink from it, your will be done." He wants to walk his path. Part of waking up in our lives, part of waking up is drinking our cups. But you see, it's not drinking our cups with a hook. Oh, and then I'm holy, or then I'm safe, or then I know that I'm in the right, or I'm doing the right thing. There's no setup there to rest. It's the willingness to say, if this is my cup, I rest in the unrest. That's our call. So today's then meditation is a bit of a contemplative Lectio Divina, and I'm going to kind of weave back and forth between reading a version of the Lord's Prayer from Prayers of the Cosmos. So it's a modern interpretation of the Aramaic that Neil Douglas Klotz has given to us. And then in between each reading, I'm going to sing the 2 verses of a popular song written in 1972 called Seek Ye First. And I ask you to overlook the gender reference of kingdom and God, and let it be the words that are meaningful to you. And if you're inclined, what I'd like you to do when you have your eyes closed is let it be a little bit of a call and response, where I give a pause and you silently or audibly say the phrase. And all we're doing here is we're saying yes to our lives. Letting it go, saying yes to our lives, drinking our cups, not as a position of safety in the world, but stepping into the unknown and in situations that are difficult, unrest. So I invite you to close your eyes. Connect to your breath. And now bring your focus to your body. And notice that your body is situated in space, and you are much more than your body. Become aware of this fluidity. And allow the living memory of the Garden of Gethsemane in Jesus' time be in your awareness of this space. Going to commune with a fellow human being who went through a lot. And open ourselves to the very unknown of our own lives. If you wish, take a few moments in silence and intentionalize this meditation. Say yes to your life in a new way. And if you wish to repeat after me, please do, but either way, let this prayer arise within you or fall upon you. O birther, Father, Mother of the cosmos, focus your light within me, make it useful. Create your reign of unity now. Your one desire then acts with mine. As in all light, so in all forms. Grant what I need each day in bread and insight. Loose the cords of mistakes binding me. As I release the strands I hold of others' guilt. Do not let surface things delude me. But free me from what holds me back. From you is born all ruling will. The power and the life to do. The song that beatifies all. From age to age it renews. Truly power to these statements. May they be the ground from which all my actions grow. Amen. And we sit in that intention. And if you're inclined, sing along as you spontaneously remember any of these words. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Alleluia. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Alleluia, alleluia. Where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in their midst. And whatsoever they ask, I will do. Alleluia, alleluia. And we bring this short contemplative practice to a close. I invite you to bring your palms together in front of your heart. And in so doing, place the intention to live your life fully and to drink your cups to the bottom. And when you're ready, open your eyes with Namaste. Namaste.